The wind howled like a living beast. Snow flew sideways in the cold air, cutting like tiny blades. Callan's hands were frozen inside his gloves. He leaned over the console of his hovercart, watching the warning lights blink red. "Come on," he whispered, hitting the side of the machine. "Just a few more miles." But the engine didn't listen. It sputtered once, coughed, and then died completely. The light faded from the dashboard, and everything went quiet, too quiet. He was alone in the middle of an alien ice field, nothing around him but endless white hills of snow and the sharp black spikes of alien trees in the distance. No signal, no power, no heat. He looked at the sky, but the sun was hidden by clouds thick as stone. The wind roared again, shaking the small cart and slamming the tarp above the supplies. Callan closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. This mission had started as a routine delivery. Food and medical packs for a remote village 3 days away. Now he was stranded. And night was coming fast. He climbed out of the cart and sank up to his knees in the snow. His boots were strong, but the cold bit through them anyway. He wrapped his coat tighter and moved to the back of the cart, checking the supplies, at least. He had enough food for 2 days, maybe 3 if he rationed it, but no fuel, no tools to fix the hover engine. And the nearest outpost was a full day's walk. In this storm, walking was suicide. Callan sat back against the cart and looked around. He saw no movement, no life, just snow and silence. But then he heard something, a soft crunch, footsteps. He froze, heart pounding, and reached for the small stun rod on his belt. Another crunch, closer this time, then a growl low, deep, and tired. From behind a snowbank, a figure crawled into view. It was a girl, but not human. She had fur-like. A wolf. Soft gray with streaks of white. Her body was thin, ribs showing, and a long tail dragged behind her. Her ears were pointed, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She dropped to all fours, panting hard. Around her neck was a metal collar. Cracked and burned, she looked like she had run a long way, maybe from something terrible. But right now, she was shaking, starving, and ready to fall. Callan didn't move. The girl stared at him, not growling anymore, just watching, like a wild animal, unsure if he was friend or enemy. He slowly opened a food pack and tore a strip of dried meat. Then he tossed it gently toward her. She sniffed it, crawled forward, and grabbed it with her teeth. She chewed fast, like she hadn't eaten in days. Then she looked at him again, eyes softer this time. No words passed between them. Just the cold wind. Callan opened another strip and placed it on the snow in front of him. This time, she crawled closer. Slowly, she picked it up and sat just a few feet away. Still on all fours, Callan took off his coat and laid it on the snow. "You can lie down here," he said gently. "It's warmer." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She crept onto the coat and curled into a ball, her body shaking from the cold. He took the small heat pack from the cart and activated it. Then he wrapped it in cloth and placed it beside her. She looked up, surprised, then let her head rest beside it. Sighing softly, the snow kept falling. The storm was not stopping any time soon. Callan knew he couldn't leave her alone. Not now. He pulled out a blanket and covered her, then sat beside her in the snow. The silence returned, but it didn't feel so empty now. Two strangers, frozen by fate, stuck in the same storm. Neither spoke the same language, but both needed the same thing: warmth, food, and hope. As the wind screamed above them, Callan whispered quietly, "We'll figure it out tomorrow." The alien girl, half asleep, twitched her ears and let out a soft sound, almost like she agreed. The storm didn't stop through the night. Snow piled up against the hovercart, and Callan had to dig it out with his bare hands. The alien girl slept beside the cart, wrapped in the old blanket, her breath steady. He checked on her often, unsure why he cared so much. Maybe it was the way she had looked at him like she was ready to die until someone showed her kindness. By morning, the cold had gotten worse. The wind wasn't as strong, but the temperature had dropped even more. Callan's fingers hurt even inside his gloves, and his legs were stiff from sitting too long. He tried the engine again, hitting the side panel and pressing every button. Nothing. The power core was dead, frozen solid. And the cart wouldn't even blink to life. He was stuck, with no way forward and no way back. He stepped away from the cart and stared at the white horizon. There was nothing but snow for miles. The village he was trying to reach was still too far. Walking there would take days without a proper path. And he had no map, no beacon, no signal. Callan sat on the frozen cart rail, buried his face in his hands, and sighed. They were going to die here, and the thought of that girl freezing beside him made it worse. Then he heard a sound behind him. A grunt and the crunch of snow. He turned and saw her moving toward the cart, dragging the blanket with her like a cape. Her body still looked weak, her legs shaking a little, but her eyes were awake now. She tilted her head at the cart, walked around it slowly, sniffing the metal and ropes. Then she did something Callan didn't expect. She lowered her body to the ground and crawled under the front of the cart. She paused there, placed her claws on the tow handles, and gave him a serious look. He stared, confused. "What are you doing?" he asked, even though he knew she didn't understand. She didn't answer, of course. She just leaned forward and bit the thick rope hanging from the front rail. Then she started to pull. The cart didn't move at first, just creaked slightly. She growled, pushed harder with her legs, her claws digging into the frozen ground, and then, slowly, the cart shifted just a little, just enough to crunch through the snow. Callan stood frozen, watching in disbelief. She was actually pulling it, on her own, in the middle of a snowfield. With nothing but muscle and willpower, he rushed to the side of the cart and helped guide it. He kicked away snow and cleared a path in front of her. Every few feet, he'd stop and check her. But she kept moving, never looking back. Her paws trembled, and steam rose from her mouth with every breath. But she didn't give up, not even once. They only made a few hundred steps that first hour, but it was enough to believe they weren't going to die. Callan gave her a piece of meat from his pack and gently rubbed her back. She leaned into his touch without fear now. And that small moment felt like the start of something powerful. When night came again, he cleared a place in the snow and made a small fire using leftover cratewood. She lay close to it, chewing slowly, watching him as he worked. Callan sat beside her, his hands trembling from cold and exhaustion. He looked at the sky, where stars flickered behind thin clouds. "This world is trying to kill us," he whispered, "but I don't think it's ready for us." She blinked slowly, then scooted closer, placing her paw gently over his boot. That night, they slept back to back, the snow building around them like a blanket, and though the wind still roared, they didn't feel alone anymore. They were moving, even if only a little, together, one step at a time. Snowflakes landed silently on her fur as she pulled the cart uphill. The rope dug into her shoulders. Her paws slipped on the ice, and fresh cuts marked her legs. She didn't cry, didn't whimper. She just kept going, step after step, dragging the heavy weight behind her like she had no choice. Callan walked beside her, his breath fogging the air. He held a broken stick like a cane and cleared snow ahead. But his eyes never left her, not for a second, each time she stumbled. He ran forward to catch her, but she always pushed him away gently. She didn't want him to carry her burden. She had chosen this. And he didn't understand why. They stopped. Near a crooked tree growing sideways in the snow, she dropped to her knees, chest heaving, her fur soaked in sweat and melting snow. Callan rushed over and wrapped a dry cloth around her paws. The skin beneath was cracked, raw, and bleeding. He cursed under his breath and gave her water from his flask. She took only one sip and pushed the rest back toward him. Her eyes said what she couldn't. He needed it more. He tried lifting the cart himself while she rested. He tied the rope around his waist and pulled with all his strength. But the cart barely moved an inch before he collapsed. He groaned and pounded the snow, breathless and frustrated. She stood slowly and placed her paw on his shoulder. When he looked up, she gave him a small, tired smile. That smile hurt more than any snow or hunger. He realized then she had been a slave, forced to pull for others, but now she was doing it freely for him, and that made every step harder to watch. Later that evening, he boiled a tiny pouch of soup using the last of his fire gel. He tore the food into 2 bowls and handed one to her. She sniffed it and pushed it back, giving him both. "Don't be stubborn," he muttered, trying to hand it back, but she only curled beside him, head resting on his knee. He fed her slowly with his hands, piece by piece, until she finally accepted it. She chewed carefully, watching his face with those glowing eyes. The stars above looked sharp, cold, and endless. But the space between them felt smaller with her near. She wasn't human, didn't speak his language, didn't even know his name. Yet, every time she looked at him, he felt seen, like someone had finally noticed he existed. That night, the cold crept in deeper. Callan wrapped both of them in the blanket, holding her close to keep her warm. Her ears twitched as wind roared outside, and she tucked her nose against his chest. He whispered stories to her in a low voice, not because she could understand, but because silence felt worse. He told her about Earth, about grass and rivers and noisy cities. She closed her eyes and listened, breathing slow and steady. Suddenly, her body stiffened. Her ears shot up, and she growled softly. Callan sat up, alert, gripping his stun rod. Something was out there, moving just beyond the firelight. They both froze, listening, hearts pounding. A branch snapped. Then, silence again. She crawled in front of him, guarding him with her body, tail bristled. He held his breath, ready to fight, but nothing came. Just the cold wind and distant echoes. Still, they didn't sleep after that. She stayed beside him all night, awake, alert, and loyal. At dawn, she rose again, sore and limping. Callan tried to stop her, but she bit the rope and began pulling once more. He didn't stop her this time. Instead, he walked beside her. No longer just a traveler with a cart. Now he was her partner in survival. And though the road ahead was buried in snow, they walked it together, one bleeding paw print at a time. Asterisk, they were halfway through the canyon when the snow changed. It no longer fell, gently, came sharp, like glass. The wind screamed through the narrow cliffs, lifting the snow into blinding waves. Callan pulled his scarf tighter, but the cold still bit into his skin beside him. The alien girl, tired and wounded, pressed her shoulder against the cart, trying to shield it from the gusts. She couldn't see far, and neither could he. But something in her posture shifted, her body tensed. She stopped moving, ears standing tall, her nose lifted to the wind. He knew that look, danger, without a word. She pushed him down into the snow behind the cart and crouched low. Callan stayed still, gripping his stun rod, eyes darting left and right. A sound echoed off the cliff's metal footsteps, slow and heavy, then a flash of blue light, and then voices, speaking in a harsh language he didn't know. She bared her teeth, growling low in her throat, through the storm. Shadowy figures appeared, moving along the ridges, 3 of them, maybe 4, dressed in black armor and scanning the snow with tracking devices. Slavers. She recognized them by smell. They had once kept her in chains, forced her to pull heavy machines, beaten her when she fell. Now they were hunting again. But this time she wasn't alone. Callan peeked over the edge of the cart and saw the glow of a scanner pass too close. If they saw her, they'd shoot on sight or worse. Take her back, he couldn't let that happen. He looked around for anything: rocks, broken tools, even a loose piece of metal, something he could fight with. All he had was the stun rod, low on charge, and his own hands. It would have to be enough. One of the slavers shouted, pointing toward the cart. They'd found them. She didn't wait. With a sudden roar, she leaped from behind the cart and charged. Her claws tore into the first one, knocking him off his feet and into the snow. The second aimed his weapon, but Callan ran forward, slamming the stun rod into his chest. Electric sparks danced through the air, and the slaver collapsed. Screaming, the third ran, calling for backup. She chased after him, her paws barely touching the ground, fast like lightning. Callan tried to follow, but slipped on the ice, falling hard. He saw her tackle the last slaver behind a snowbank. There was a flash, a scream, and then silence. He limped over, afraid of what he might find when he reached her. She was standing over the broken body of the slaver, blood on her fur. Her side was burned. One of the blasts had hit her, but she didn't cry. She looked at him with wild eyes, like asking if he was okay. He nodded, rushing to her side, tearing cloth from his sleeve to press against her wound. She growled softly, but didn't pull away. They both fell to the snow, breathing hard. The storm still swirling around them like ghosts. For a long while, neither moved. He just held her, keeping pressure on the burn. She trembled, not from pain, but from the cold seeping deeper now. Callan wrapped her in the blanket and dragged both of them back to the cart. He built a fire from broken crates, not caring how much fuel he wasted. He needed to keep her alive. That night, she didn't sleep beside him. She slept on him, her head resting on his chest, her body half curled over his lap like a guardian dog that had found her human. Callan didn't close his eyes either. He kept one hand wrapped around hers, afraid she might slip away during the night. The snow fell softer now, like the storm had seen their fight and chosen to back down. In the darkness, he whispered something he hadn't said out loud before. You're not a tool, or a pet, or a slave. You're someone I'd die for. She didn't understand the words, but she shifted closer, pressing her ear to his heartbeat. That was enough for both of them. The sky was clear for once. For the first time in days, the clouds had parted, letting pale light shine down on the frozen trail. The silence was peaceful, but not kind. Every breath Callan took still burned in his chest. The wind was sharp, the cold deep, and the cart felt heavier than ever. But he wasn't alone. She walked beside him now, no longer pulling the cart on all fours. Her side was wrapped in fresh bandages, her step unsteady but proud. Callan had begged her to rest, to let him try alone, but she refused, gently nudging him with her nose until he gave in. So they walked together, him dragging the cart, her limping beside him, guarding like a silent soldier. The map on Callan's old wristband said they were close. Just one more ridge, and the village would be on the other side. The supplies they carried could save lives: medicine, food, heaters. But each step felt heavier than the last. The path narrowed between sharp rocks and frozen cliffs. Snow crunched underfoot, and the sound echoed strangely at the top of the ridge. Callan stopped. Below them, smoke curled into the sky, not from chimneys, but from burning. The village gate was broken. A watchtower tilted sideways. He dropped to his knees, stunned. The place they had fought so hard to reach was already in ruins. She crouched beside him, sniffing the air. Her fur bristled, her ears lowered. She smelled something terrible: burnt wood, oil, and blood. Callan stood slowly and pulled the cart forward. Down the slope, every part of him wanted to run, but he had to stay calm. The village might still be alive, hidden, waiting. When they reached the broken gate, They saw no people, only silence. The snow was stained with ash and footprints. Some small, some heavy like boots. Callan called out, voice shaky. "Hello?" No answer, just the whisper of cold wind moving through broken homes. Then came a sound of faint whimper behind a stone wall. She heard it first and darted forward, limping but fast. Callan followed and found a child, maybe 6 years old, hiding. Under debris, the girl clung to a broken blanket, her eyes wide with terror. She screamed when she saw the alien canine figure beside Callan. But Callan dropped to one knee and held out his hands. "It's okay," he said gently. "We're here to help." The alien girl backed away slowly, lowering her body so she looked smaller, less scary. The child blinked, then looked at Callan again. Confused but no longer screaming, he reached into the cart, pulled out a food packet, and handed it to. The child, tiny hands grabbed it, and the girl devoured it hungrily. More children appeared too from a cracked door, one crawling from under a cart. No adults, no guards, just kids. Some hurt, some covered in ash, all scared. Callan's heart sank. Who had done this? And where were the people who were supposed to protect them? One boy pointed to the sky. "Big ship," he whispered. "It came yesterday, took the grown-ups." "Anyone who could fight," she growled low under her breath, pacing now, her claws leaving deep marks in the snow. Callan stood still, his fists clenched. He looked at the cart, then at the children. The supplies, they were meant for them now. It wasn't just about survival. It was about saving what was left. They unloaded everything, handing out food, blankets, bandages. The alien girl stayed quiet, but near the children. At first, they feared her, hiding behind walls. But when she gently licked the hand of a child with a burned arm, everything changed. The children gathered around her like she was some kind of silent protector. One of them even laughed when she wagged her tail slightly as the sun set, smoke rising behind them. Callan sat on a stone step. Tired but awake, she rested beside him, her body covered in scratches and dirt, but her eyes bright. A child curled beside her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Callan looked around at the broken village, the quiet children, the cold night ahead, and then he looked at her. This alien girl who once pulled his cart through snow now stood between these children and the dark. He whispered, "You're not just strong. You're a miracle." She didn't answer, but she leaned against him, her tail slowly thudding the ground. And for the first time in many days, Callan didn't feel lost. He felt like he had found exactly where he was needed. The wind had finally calmed. The sky above the ruined village turned a soft blue, with slow-moving clouds stretching far into the horizon. It almost looked peaceful. But peace was not what anyone felt. Inside a half-burnt house, Callan sat with a child on his lap, pressing a warm pack to the girl's feet across the room. The alien girl, her body still weak, curled on a thick rug. Wrapped in soft cloth, she had collapsed after giving her last strength to protect the children. Now, her body was healing, but her mind stayed wide awake. She didn't sleep much, not really. Her eyes would close, but her ears never stopped twitching. Every footstep outside, every whisper, every creak of wood made her stir. She had lived in cages too long, under too many cruel hands to ever feel safe, but something was different now. These humans, these little ones, weren't afraid anymore. One of the children, barely tall enough to reach her head, walked up with a piece of cooked root in her hands. The girl hesitated, then slowly offered it. The alien sniffed it, then looked at the child. Her glowing eyes softened. She didn't eat it right away. She placed a paw over the child's hand and held it there for a moment, warm and careful. Callan watched from across the room. Not saying anything, there was no need to speak. This moment said more than words. Later that day, the elder of the village returned, a woman with silver hair, a long coat, and eyes that had seen war. She arrived on a snowrunner, followed by others carrying tools and supplies. When she entered the house and saw the alien girl lying beside the children, her face hardened. "Is this one of them?" she asked, "a slave from the enemy mines." Callan stood up, his voice firm. "She saved me. She saved the kids. She pulled my cart through a blizzard, fought off hunters, and nearly died protecting this village. She's not." One of them, the elder, walked closer, her boots cracking the ice underfoot. She looked down at the girl, who now stood quietly, not growling, not moving, just watching, waiting. The elder lowered herself to one knee and looked into her eyes. "What do you want?" the elder asked softly. There was no answer, but the girl tilted her head toward Callan. Then back to the children. That was enough. The elder nodded once, stood up, and said, "She stays." That evening, Callan sat outside on a wooden crate. The stars above blinking in the quiet sky, the alien girl lay beside him, her head resting on his leg, tail curled around her body. The children had made her a necklace from wire and colorful stones they found in the rubble. It wasn't pretty, but she wore it with pride. "Do you remember the day we met?" Callan said, brushing her fur gently. "You could barely stand. And now the whole village sees you as a guardian." She looked up at him, blinking slowly. Then she did something she hadn't done before. She gently licked his hand. It was a small gesture, but Callan froze, not because of fear, but because of what it meant. She trusted him fully. The fire beside them crackled, and the cold didn't feel so harsh anymore. The village had lights again, the children were safe, and the girl who had once been dragged in chains was now free. Not just free to walk, but free to choose, and she had chosen to stay with him. The snow had melted in patches by the time spring arrived. Small green roots broke through the frozen ground, and the air didn't bite as hard anymore. The village was rebuilding, not just homes, but hearts. New walls stood where ruins had been. Children laughed again, and fires burned warm instead of desperate. But what people spoke about most wasn't the weather. It was the girl. The alien who once dragged a cart through death's grip now walked freely among them like a silent guardian. She didn't speak their language, but she understood their emotions. When a baby cried, she was the first to appear, her soft growl quieting the child. When the fields needed clearing, she helped, dragging wood or lifting stone, and every night, without fail, she sat beside Callan near the fire. As if nothing in the universe felt safer than that spot, visitors from nearby towns came, bringing questions and offers. They had heard the story, how a human and a beast had survived a frozen wasteland and protected a ruined village. Some came with weapons afraid she might still be dangerous. Some came with collars, thinking she was still for sale. Callan didn't answer them with speeches. He simply stood beside her, one hand resting on her fur. And she stood taller than any soldier, never flinching, never bowing. One man asked, "What is she to you?" Callan looked down at her, then back at the man. "She's not mine," he said. "She's not property. She's my friend and my hero." The man laughed at first until he saw her eyes. There was nothing funny in the way she watched him. That day, the man left without another word, and the village locked its gates behind him. On the first spring festival, the children of the village made drawings. They drew stars, fire, flowers, and one strange-looking wolf with glowing eyes. The alien girl, Mira. Myrad, that was what they called her now. It meant light after darkness in the old tongue that night. Callan sat by the fire with a small cup of warmed herbs. Mira rested with her head on his foot, her eyes half closed. He looked out toward the mountains, where the path had almost taken his life. And then he looked down at her, the same girl who had once been half dead in the snow. He smiled and whispered, "You pulled me through hell, and I didn't even ask you to. But I'll spend the rest of my life thanking you." She didn't move, but her tail tapped the ground once. Soft, steady, like a heartbeat, the stars above blinked quietly. The wind carried no threat anymore, only peace. And though they were from different worlds, different species, and different pasts, they shared the same future, not as master and servant, not as rescuer and rescued, but as survivors, as friends, as legends in a world that had nearly forgotten what loyalty meant. And in the quiet of the night, as the village slept and the fire burned low, Callan leaned back against the wall, his eyes drifting shut. Mira stayed awake just a little longer, watching over him. Because even now, when the danger had passed, she still chose to protect the man who had treated her not like a tool, but like a soul.